Good morning. Welcome. It is Thursday, February 13th, and this is a TikTok Live. My name's Steven. This is at Steve OC's. We are talking about A Course in Miracles, reviewing one lesson per day and a corresponding text every day. And we begin each day by reading from the introduction to the course. This is the introduction to the text. It says this is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way: nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Nothing real can be threatened. Everything in the mind of God, everything that God created is real. And God created you and I, and we are in the mind of God. We cannot be threatened. We are perfectly safe and secure at all times in the mind of God. Hello, Beverly, Andrea, Debbie, and A Tribe Called Shoe, Zero Pop Art. Welcome. Good morning. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. A Tribe Called Chum is asking a question. We're talking about A Course in Miracles, and so we'll stick with that subject today. Okay, we are looking at lesson 44 from A Course in Miracles, which is God is the light in which I see. God is the light in which I see. And this lesson reads, today we are continuing the idea for yesterday, adding another dimension to it. You cannot see in darkness, and you cannot make light. You can make darkness and then think you see in it, but light reflects life and is therefore an aspect of creation. Creation and darkness cannot coexist, but light and life must go together, being but different aspects of creation. In order to see, God is the light in which I see. In order to see, you must recognize that light is within, not without. You do not see outside yourself, nor is the equipment for seeing outside of you. An essential part of this equipment is the light that makes seeing possible. It is with you always, making vision possible in every circumstance. Okay, so obviously we have eyes, and we are taught scientifically that light reflects off of things into our eyes and images created. Now, the Course does say, as one of the exercises, these thoughts are images I have made. So what it says in the Course is that we've created image-making devices, our senses, in order to obscure the fact of the true light of God. So as it talks about light here, and says you must recognize that light is within, not without. From my perspective, what it is talking about basically is the third eye, or the pineal gland, which generates its own light, and from which we can imagine things and see pictures in our mind, inside our own head, so to speak, quote unquote. Okay. So it's along those sorts of lines. We have to make sure we don't get too caught up in thinking about the body as real. And I'm not sure if it says it in the workbook today or in the text, but it will talk about the body and the ego mind's relationship to the body. So those two go together, the ego mind and the body, and then the Holy Spirit and the higher self go together. And so what we would like to do is turn the other cheek, turn our attention to the higher self, or the I am and the Holy Spirit, and take our attention away from the body and the ego mind. Okay, we have been going over those concepts. I won't go too deeply into that right now, but thanks, sir. Wait, what? Just put a couple likes up there. Thanks for tapping the screen, and I do appreciate it. And thanks for participating and interacting. So, continuing, it says today we are going to attempt to reach that light, the internal light. For this purpose, we will use a form of exercise which has been suggested before and which we will utilize increasingly. It is a particularly difficult form for the undisciplined mind and represents a major goal of mind training. It requires precisely what the untrained mind lacks. Yet this training must be accomplished if you are to see. Have at least 3 practice periods today, each lasting 3 to 5 minutes. A longer time is highly recommended, but only if you find the time slipping by with little or no sense of strain. Form of practice, the reason it says little or no sense of strain is we want to stay away from the idea of ritual, like doing this just because it's a ritual and I'm going to stick to the ritual and I'm going to stick to it. We want to relieve ourselves from the idea of coercion. So the Holy Spirit is working with our mind to lead us to the true mind, to the truth. And the Holy Spirit only suggests. The Holy Spirit does not coerce or force. So if it's saying if some strain starts to come up while we're working with these mind exercises and mind disciplines, the idea is to let it go for a minute so we don't feel as if we are being coerced. Your mind is no longer wholly untrained. You are quite ready to learn the form of exercise we will use today, but you may find that you will encounter strong resistance. The reason is very simple. While you practice in this way, you leave behind everything that you now believe and all the thoughts that you have made up. Properly speaking, this is the release from hell. Yet perceived through the ego's eyes, it is loss of identity and a descent into hell. So as you work with the exercises, you might find some resistance, and the resistance is going to be coming from the ego mind. And the ego is suspicious at best and becomes vicious at worst. It says later in the course. So the ego kind of senses it's being undermined and starts to resist. And this can even be subconscious or unconscious resistance. That sense of strain might come up. It could also be the ego resisting the exercises and the training that we're undergoing. It says begin the practice period by repeating today's idea with your eyes open and close them slowly, repeating the idea several times more. God is the light in which I see. Sorry, I skipped a paragraph there. If you can stand aside from the ego, this is important, so I'll read it. If you can stand aside from the ego by ever so little, you will have no difficulty in recognizing that its opposition and its fears are meaningless. You might find it helpful to remind yourself from time to time that to reach light is to escape from darkness, whatever you may believe to the contrary. God is the light in which you see. You are attempting to reach him. Okay, so we repeat the day's idea. God is the light in which I see with eyes open and eyes closed. God is the light in which I see several times. Then try to sink into your mind, letting go of every kind of interference and intrusion by quietly sinking past them. Your mind cannot be stopped in this unless you choose to stop it. It is merely taking its natural course. Try to observe your passing thoughts without involvement and slip quietly by them. While no particular approach is advocated for this form of exercise, could call it meditation. You're just watching your thoughts and trying to sink deeper into ourselves. Okay. It's inestimable value to you and an awareness that you are attempting something very holy. While no particular approach is advocated for this form of exercise, what is needful is a sense of the importance of what you are doing. It's inestimable value to you and an awareness that you are attempting something very holy. Salvation is your happiest accomplishment. It is also the only one that has any meaning because it is the only one that has any real use to you at all. Okay? Salvation is the only real accomplishment. As we accomplish salvation, and when salvation is accomplished, it will be the one thing, the one accomplishment that will be lasting and totally satisfying. Of course, the accomplishments of the ego, as you know, as soon as we accomplish one thing, the ego then starts looking for the next thing. It's never satisfied. The essence of the ego is seek, but do not find. If resistance rises in any form, pause long enough to repeat today's idea, keeping your eyes closed unless you are aware of fear. In that case, you will probably find it more reassuring to open your eyes briefly. Try, however, to return to the exercises with eyes closed as soon as possible. If you are doing the exercises correctly, you should experience some sense of relaxation and even a feeling that you are approaching, if not actually entering into light. Try to think of light, formless and without limit, as you pass by the thoughts of this world. And do not forget that they cannot hold you to the world unless you give them power to do so. Okay, so all the distractions of the day, the things that are going to happen throughout the day, the bills that need to be paid, problems I'm having in certain relationships, what's going on at work, all those thoughts, what I have to do around the house. Okay, we're just trying to sink past those with holding thought, God is the light in which I see. We're trying also then to sense that light, but just passing by, watching those thoughts pass by. Also, throughout the day, repeat the idea often with eyes open or closed, as seems better to you at the time, but do not forget. Above all, be determined not to forget today. So, as with some of the other exercises, you can, as has been suggested, formally do the exercises first thing in the morning when you get up, last thing at night before you go to sleep, and then pick a third time during the day or two more times during the day. The last couple of days, it has suggested doing exercise 4 times a day. Then you can also do something such as you can do it once an hour or once every half hour. Try to remember once every half hour, say to yourself, God is the light in which I see. God is the light in which I see. And then the other form of practicing is if I notice any irritation or discomfort, any sort of discomfort, sadness, depression, irritation, frustration, okay? If I recognize that discomfort, I can also say the phrase for the day, then God is the light in which I see. Okay, so we're just trying to discipline our mind along the lines of the lessons as laid out in the course. And what the lessons are going to do throughout the whole year, 365 days, is give a complete thought system, okay, that can be relied upon to purify the mind. Okay, remove all the blocks to love's presence, as it says in the introduction. The meaning of love cannot be taught. That is not the purpose of the course. The purpose of the course is to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So we will go to the text now. And corresponding text for today, the 13th, is chapter 6, section 4. One lesson per day, one section per day. And if you don't have the book, you can find this at ACIM.org. The Foundation for Inner Peace publishes the book, and this is their website. So the entire text, the workbook, and all the supplementary materials are available online at acim.org. So this section, section 4, chapter 6, is called The Only Answer. And it says, remember that the Holy Spirit is the answer, not the question. The ego always speaks first. So there's two voices that can be listened to, the voice of the ego or the voice of the Holy Spirit. The ego never has the answer, even though it thinks it does. It never has the answer, but it always speaks first. The Holy Spirit has the answer. The Holy Spirit is the answer. But you have to stop, pause, and listen for the Holy Spirit. The ego always speaks first. It is capricious and does not mean its maker well. You are the ego's maker. I am the ego's maker. It believes, and correctly, that its maker may withdraw his support from it at any moment. If it meant you well, it would be glad, as the Holy Spirit will be glad when she has brought you home and you no longer need her guidance. The ego does not regard itself as part of you. Herein lies its primary error, the foundation of its whole thought system. The ego thinks it is autonomous. The ego thinks it's separate. The ego mind thinks it's separate and autonomous. It doesn't even realize that it's getting its life force or energy from somewhere. It just, as the Course says, it doesn't ask those kind of questions. It just blots it out of its mind. Okay, it suppresses it. Okay, it censors those types of questions, doesn't allow those types of questions. So, continuing, when God created you, he made you part of him. That is why attack within the kingdom is impossible. You made the ego without love, and so it does not love you. You could not remain within the kingdom without love. And since the kingdom is love, you believe that you are without it or outside of it. This enables the ego to regard itself as separate and outside its maker, thus speaking for the part of your mind that believes you are separate and outside of the mind of God. So It's a question of identity. Who do I say I am? So I can identify with the ego, or I can identify with God and the Holy Spirit. Ego then raised the first question that was ever asked, but one it can never answer. Okay, seek but do not find, the principle of the ego. So it raises a question and it cannot answer the question. That question, what are you? What are you? Was the beginning of doubt. The ego has never answered any questions since, although it has raised a great many. The most inventive activities of the ego have never done more than obscure the question, because you have the answer and the ego is afraid of you. You cannot understand the conflict until you fully understand the basic fact that the ego cannot know anything. So listening to the voice of the ego is listening to something that is never right, that can never be right, that can never come up with the correct answer. It doesn't even ask the proper question. It has asked the question, who am I? What am I? But it doesn't have the answer. It cannot be answered because it does not know God. You cannot understand the conflict until you fully understand the basic fact that the ego cannot know anything. The Holy Spirit does not speak first, but she always answers. Everyone has called upon her for help at one time or another, and in one way or another, and has been answered. Since the Holy Spirit answers truly, she answers for all time, which means that everyone has the answer now. The ego cannot hear the Holy Spirit, but it does believe that part of the mind that made it is against it. It interprets this as a justification for attacking its maker. It believes that the best defense is attack and wants you to believe it. Unless you do believe it, you will not side with it. And the ego feels badly in need of allies, though not of brothers. Perceiving something alien to itself in your mind, the ego turns to the body as its ally. As we said earlier, the ego and the body are a pair. Okay, and the higher self and the Holy Spirit are a pair. And you're stuck in the middle. You have to choose. We have to make a decision. Will it be the higher self and the Holy Spirit, or will it be the ego and the body? Which do I believe is real? Which do I value? Okay. Where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. The ego uses the body to conspire against your mind, and because the ego realizes that its enemy can end them both merely by recognizing they are not part of you, they join in the attack together. This is perhaps the strangest perception of all, if you consider what it really involves. The ego, which is not real, attempts to persuade the mind, which is real, that the mind is the ego's learning device, and further, that the body is more real than the mind is. No one in his right mind could possibly believe this, and no one in his right mind does believe it. Hear then the one answer of the Holy Spirit to all the questions the ego raises. You are a child of God, a priceless part of his kingdom, which he created as part of him. Nothing else exists, and only this is real. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real, and God calls you to awake. So the world that we see with our eyes is a dream. We have fallen asleep, and God is asking us to wake up. Good morning, Beth Sybil. Good to see you. Thank you for the likes. Morning. You have chosen a sleep in which you have had bad dreams, but the sleep is not real and God calls you to awake. There will be nothing left of your dream when you hear him because you will awaken. Your dreams contain many of the ego's symbols and they have confused you. Yet, that was only because you were asleep and did not know. When you wake, you will see the truth around you and in you, and you will no longer believe in dreams because they will have no reality for you. Yet the kingdom and all that you have created Yet the kingdom and all that you have created there will have great reality for you because they are beautiful and true. Okay? And this is another long section today. I would recommend you go read it yourself. It talks about now the kingdom. It also talks about the introduction of abilities into being because of uncertainties. Abilities are potentials and not accomplishments. Everything has been accomplished already in the mind of God. But since we are living a dream of separation, we have abilities which are only potential accomplishments. So it talks about that. It talks about developing those abilities. This is an interesting part we could touch on quickly. You are in an impossible situation only because you think it is possible to be in one. You would be in an impossible situation if God showed you your perfection and proved to you that you were wrong. This would demonstrate that the perfect are inadequate to bring themselves to the awareness of their perfection, and thus side with the belief that those who have everything need help and are therefore helpless. All right, so we're perfect, but we think we're not perfect. So if God just showed us we were perfect instead of letting us figure it out, he would be saying that the perfect need help and therefore they're not perfect. So the Course calls this reasoning with capital R, and this type of reasoning runs throughout the text, and it seems confusing and upside down to the ego, but it is in fact reasoning with the truth. Okay, so it says it here. This would demonstrate that the perfect are inadequate to bring themselves to the awareness of their perfection, and thus side with the belief that those who have everything need help and are therefore helpless. And it says this is the kind of reasoning, quote unquote, in which the ego engages. God, who knows that his creations are perfect, does not affront them. This would be impossible as the ego's notion that it has affronted God. That is why the Holy Spirit never commands. To command is to assume inequality, which the Holy Spirit demonstrates does not exist. Fidelity to premises is a law of mind, and everything God created is faithful to his laws. So when we reason with the Holy Spirit, when we think with the Holy Spirit, we are reasoning with the laws of God, the laws of mind. All is mind. God is mind. It says, God does not teach. To teach is to imply a lack, which God knows is not there. Teaching aims at change, but God created only the changeless. The separation was not a loss of perfection, but a failure in communication. A harsh and strident form of communication arose as the ego's voice. It could not shatter the peace of God, but it could shatter yours and mine. God did not blot it out because to eradicate it would be to attack it. Being questioned, he did not question. He merely gave the answer. The answer is your teacher. The answer is the Holy Spirit, which brings us right back to where we started, the only answer. The only answer is the Holy Spirit. The idea we want to keep in mind is that if I meditate, concentrate, and pray with the Holy Spirit will purify my mind, purify my thinking, removing all contradictions, doubts, worries from it. And what is there is already there, which is the mind of God, the peace of God, the peace of the kingdom that passes human understanding. Okay, so that was lesson 44 today. God is the light in which I see. And also chapter 6, section 4, the only answer, the Holy Spirit. So I do this every day live on TikTok, 11 a.m. Central Time. And we will go through one workbook lesson per day and one section from the text. If you cannot make it and you would still like to participate or see the discussion from each day, it is uploaded to YouTube on the same day. You can find my YouTube channel at Steve O Sees. And I'm here every day at 11 a.m. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace and blessings. Love you.